The goal is get them to the transition point. The goal is not what happens to them after they've transitioned. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another LGB Alliance USA News Roundup. This is for the week ending August 11th. Our stories today are a Brazilian woman gets 25-year sentence for misgendering, Italy plans pediatric trans restrictions, Minnesota gets rid of women's fencing, the ACLU loses in the 10th Circuit Court over Oklahoma gender medicine ban, and a grassroots group seeks to repeal Ohio's same-sex marriage ban. And I'll hand it over to you, Sylvia.
Thanks, Jos. Turning to South America and Europe for a truly insane story about the excesses of transgender cancel culture, a Brazilian woman was recently granted asylum in a European country after being threatened with 25 years imprisonment in Brazil for misgendering a trans-identified politician. According to Redux magazine, this saga began in 2020 when the Brazilian woman in question, named Isabella Kepa, wrote a social media post about the election of Erica Hilton to the Sao Paulo municipal government. When Hilton was celebrated as the woman who received the most votes in Brazil's election, Kepa expressed disappointment that he was in fact a trans-identifying male. After making her social media post, Kepa went to go shopping, and when she returned, she realized a tsunami of outrage against her had since ensued. One of Hilton's friends, Sylvia and of Brazil's franchise of Elle magazine, had launched a smear campaign against Kepa. Yanaya even accused Kepa of racism by claiming that she accused a black man of sexually assaulting her. In fact, as Kepa explained, it was a white man who sexually assaulted her, and the charge that she reported a black man was false. But Yanaya persisted in her smear campaign. In November of 2021, Hilton reported Kepa to the police, but it wasn't until June of 2022 that Kepa learned about the possible charges she faced due to reporting from Folha, a major Brazilian newspaper. Folha reported that she could face up to 25 years in prison for racism. It should be noted that in 2019, Brazil's Supreme Court ruled that discrimination against LGBTQ is a form of racism, specifically social racism. Kepa claimed that the 25-year possible sentence was made up in order to intimidate her and other like-minded women to silence. Kepa's ordeal continued in 2024 when she was stopped by Brazilian authorities in an airport on her way to Spain. When authorities interviewed her for further inspection, they realized she could be a candidate for political asylum and advised her to board the plane to Spain and not return to Brazil. On August 6, Redux confirmed that the European Union Agency for Asylum has approved Kepa's asylum claim, and she is living in a European country whose name is not being disclosed for privacy reasons. Why is this story so huge? First, it goes to show the dictatorial vindictiveness of trans rights activists. According to the Brazilian women's rights group, Matria, this is the first time since the end of Brazil's military dictatorship in 1985 that a Brazilian citizen has been granted asylum under the grounds of state persecution. Second, it sets a precedent for the future, as it also is the first time anybody in the world has been granted asylum under the grounds of expressing gender-critical views. Finally, the fact that even the EU, which is generally viewed as supportive of all things TQ, would grant asylum to a Brazilian for being gender-critical challenges the narrative some people have of the pro-TQ Europe versus the more conservative Global South. The battles over gender ideology are being waged all over the world, and no matter where you are, you have to remain vigilant. Hat tip to Redux for reporting on this case. We'll leave a link to their articles and X in the show notes below. Moving now to a story from Bernard Lane of Gender Clinic News. Italy's cabinet on Wednesday approved a draft law to impose tighter controls on hormonal treatment for gender-distressed minors, aiming to move away from the affirmative-only approach and mirror more cautious protocols adopted in Northern Europe. Health Minister Orazio Shalasi and Family Minister Eugenia Maria Roccella introduced the bill, which would create Italy's first national registry to track prescriptions of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and associated medical health evaluations in youth under 18. Under the proposal, any hormonal intervention for gender dysphoria would require a formal diagnosis by a multidisciplinary team, documented results from psychological or psychiatric care, and approval from a national pediatric ethics committee. The registry, mandated to launch within 90 days under the authority of the Italian Medicines Agency, must collect data on treatment decisions, comorbidities, and patient follow-up, with biannual reports to the Health Ministry and a 3-year parliamentary update. The parents group, Generation D, which sponsored the measure, praised it as establishing, quote, a solid regulatory framework, quote, and ensuring gradual, clinically justified decisions. Generation D highlighted past lapses, most notably at Florence's Carraghi Hospital, where multidisciplinary protocols were reportedly bypassed despite national guidelines dating back to 2019. Italy's National Bioethics Committee had recommended last year that puberty blockers be confined to clinical trials and that all treatment decisions be rigorously documented, citing insufficient evidence on long-term risks and minors' capacity to consent. The new bill codifies those principles, emphasizing psychological support as the first-line intervention for adolescents whose gender dysphoria may resolve or change post-puberty. Reuters reports that, despite protests, the draft enjoys strong backing from Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's government coalition, making its passage through Parliament likely in the coming months. Of course, trans-identifying activists have voiced their objections. The Minnesota Division of USA Fencing announced Thursday that it will henceforth sanction only, quote, mixed gender events, quote, in direct response to the USA Fencing's new policy barring biologically male athletes from women's competitions. The state chapter criticized the national policy as harmful and said it conflicts with the Minnesota Human Rights Act's protections for gender identity. Under rules adopted last month, USA Fencing aligned with the new USOPC guidelines to restrict its women's category to female athletes. Minnesota officials said that change has caused, quote, pain and confusion in the entire fencing community, end quote, and vowed to uphold their commitment to inclusion by offering mixed events only. In its announcement, the division acknowledged it is seeking legal guidance to ensure it does not violate either national fencing rules or state anti-discrimination law. A statement added, quote, trans and non-binary fencers belong here, and we see you, end quote, and called on USA Fencing to reconsider what it called an overly rigid approach to gender eligibility. The dispute comes amid a string of controversies for USA Fencing in 2025. In April, women's fencer Stephanie Turner was disqualified and handed a black card after kneeling to protest facing a trans-identifying male opponent. Her protest prompted nationwide backlash and a congressional hearing by the Department of Government Efficiency's Unfair Play Subcommittee, where Turner and USA Fencing Chair Damien Lefelt testified in May. In early June, the National Board amended unrelated policies on host site selection and anthem protocols following criticism, then faced internal legal turmoil when 2 directors sued the rest of the board, accusing Lefelt of making false statements to Congress. USA Fencing has characterized that lawsuit as a derivative action it will vigorously defend. Meanwhile, Minnesota has emerged as a focal point in the broader high school sports battle over trans-identifying athlete participation. State Attorney General Keith Ellison has filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration over Trump's executive order forcing sex-segregated sports categories. And a case has been filed against A.G. Ellison by 3 anonymous female softball players who were forced to compete with a trans-identifying male pitcher. At the same time, federal Title IX investigations are underway by the Education Department and Health and Human Services Department. Now to you, Joss.
Thanks, Sylvia. Starting off in Oklahoma, a unanimous 3-judge panel of the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals has upheld Oklahoma's 2023 prohibition on gender medical treatments for individuals under 18, ruling the law was not enacted with discriminatory intent. Senate Bill 613, passed by the Oklahoma legislature in May 2023, criminalizes provision of puberty blockers, hormone therapies, and related procedures to minors, classifying violations by healthcare providers as a felony. Lambda Legal and the ACLU of Oklahoma challenged Oklahoma Senate Bill 613 in federal court, arguing that it infringes on equal protection guarantees under the 14th Amendment, just like the ACLU argued in U.S. v. Scarametti. And just like in the Supreme Court decision, the ACLU of Oklahoma and Lambda Legal lost in this case too. Oklahoma Attorney General Gentner Drummond hailed the appellate ruling as a critical victory, asserting the ban will spare minors from lifelong consequences of these damaging procedures. The Northern District of Oklahoma had already upheld the law in October 2023, allowing enforcement to proceed. In response, Lambda Legal and the ACLU of Oklahoma pledged to review further legal options, decrying the decision as quote-unquote devastating outcome. Moving now to positive news from Ohio. A grassroots coalition seeking to enshrine marriage equality and strengthen anti-discrimination protections cleared a major procedural hurdle Friday when Attorney General David Yost's office certified the petition titles and summaries for 2 separate constitutional amendments. With certification in hand, Ohio Equal Rights can now begin gathering the roughly 414,000 valid signatures required for each measure by July 2026. Under Ohio law, petitioners must submit signatures from at least 44 of the state's 88 counties, equal to 10% of the vote cast in the last gubernatorial election. Ohio Rights co-chair Liz Regula said her group is confident it can meet those thresholds, noting that conversations with voters consistently link protections against discrimination with the fundamental right to marry. The 2 amendments stem from an earlier petition that the Ohio Ballot Board voted 3-2 along party lines to split into distinct questions. The first proposal would remove the state's constitutional ban on same-sex marriage, which currently defines marriage as the union of one man and one woman. The second would add explicit safeguards against discrimination based on race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, recovery status for substance use disorders, pregnancy status, and other categories, applying those protections to housing, education, healthcare, and employment. Quote, Ohio's current constitution declares that all men are created equal, but it lacks the clarity needed to guide real-world disputes, end quote, Regula said. She argued that without state-level language, Ohioans must rely on federal statutes and court decisions to enforce their rights. Ohio Equal Rights will have until mid-July 2026 to collect the necessary signatures. If successful, both measures will appear on the November 2026 ballot. Worth noting, there are currently 26 states which have state constitutional bans on same-sex marriage, although these are all defunct under the Obergefell ruling. In November 2020, Nevada became the first state to repeal its constitutional ban on same-sex marriage following Obergefell. As of 2015, same-sex marriage is legal in all 50 states due to the ruling in the Supreme Court, Obergefell v. Hodges case. However, in the aftermath of the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization ruling, statutory or constitutional bans on same-sex marriages have received renewed attention over its applicability should Obergefell be overturned. In December 2022, President Biden signed the Respect for Marriage Act. In the case that Obergefell is overturned and individual states outlaw same-sex marriages, the legislation regulates that all states and U.S. territories must recognize legal unions performed in states where they are allowed. The Respect for Marriage Act was passed with bipartisan support in both chambers of Congress. And Sylvia, I'm curious what you think about this case.
I I agreed with something that you said prior to our recording, is that it feels a little fear-mongery. by the left and Democrats. Well, I definitely acknowledge that there are some conservatives that would love to repeal gay marriage and roll back a lot of gay rights. I do believe that the majority of Republicans are pretty much on board with gay rights, and that Republicans are actually a bit ahead of the curve when it comes to acknowledging the difference between LGB and the TQ. And I find it fascinating that TQ advocates will use LGB rights to garner sympathy for themselves, even when it's not necessarily a real threat, if that makes sense. What about you?
It made me think a little bit because I've just gotten married in a state that does not have same-sex marriage rights in our state constitution. In the state of Florida, marriage is between a man and a woman. So the one question it did bring to me, because I agree with you, I don't think that this is an issue that Republicans really care all that much about. In fact, the AG and the governor of Ohio are both Republicans. But because I've been married in the state of Florida now, after 24 years being together, we got married on the 10th anniversary of marriage equality.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you, thank you. Uh, it does make me wonder, would this, if something did happen, would it nullify my marriage? And would I then have to go to a state where marriage is legal to have my marriage recognized? So it does make one wonder, but I also share your sentiment that perhaps it is a little scaremongery to be super concerned about it at this point. I don't it doesn't feel like something to me that is in jeopardy or in peril. But I think it's good that like Biden has some safeguards in place and that's helpful. But yeah, how will this play out?
It can't hurt in my mind to just we have it protected at the national level and then to protect it at the state level. It's a good thing, bottom line.
One could also say it may be in the interest of Republicans in states where, like mine, like Florida, to go ahead and correct the Constitution, the state constitution. Like, let's get this on the books in all the states. So the remaining 26 states, it's just there's no cause for concern. Whatever happens with the Supreme Court happens, and we still have marriage protections. And that would be it. I think that would be a good sign of, hey, we really don't care what happens with gay marriage. This is not our cause right now. Our cause, which was gifted to us in the package with bows and wrappings, is the issue of trans stuff. So
Right. And even the states that have the bills of don't say gay, looking at Florida, which we covered that back when it was relevant, to do something like codify same-sex marriage into the state constitution would then be like, so you can't say we're anti-gay, we just don't want gender ideology in our schools. And so like the don't say gay bill was much more focused on the gender politics of it all. Of course, there will be places that push the boundaries and, will be like, oh, there's a gay couple in that book. Absolutely not. But that's not what the bill was about at all. I actually read the bill, unlike some of the people that started calling it the Don't Say Gay bill. So I completely agree with you. I think this would be another low-hanging fruit for Republicans to garner support from LGB people and even, some of the trans identifying people who want to step away from the so-called crazies, which there are a lot of them out there. And like we saw in the Brazil case, it's authoritarianism knows no party. And it's wild to me that we're living in this time where people need to seek asylum for being gender critical. And I think we have right now asylum states for, or I should say, quote unquote, asylum states for people who can't access their gender medicine for their minors that they have. But how long until we have states that become asylum states for people that misgendered someone is kind of what I'm wondering, but gotta love that First Amendment freedom of speech.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, this it's a very unique situation here in the States, especially compared to what's happening there in Brazil. And yeah, that story is just really mind-blowing to me. And then we think also we have a real move in Italy, like the stuff that's happening in Italy with putting restrictions and monitoring progress. That's all really impressive.
Absolutely. And I have to say I was shocked to find out that there hadn't already been documentation or like a database of those on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer that you would do. Just if it's a controlled substance, you would want to know who has it and who's taking it and for how long and is it effective.
Yeah,
So
what those outcomes are. And that was like kind of the shocking part of the protocol to me, to discover that really none of this for the whole time has ever had any long-term analysis or follow through. And we've heard that from people like Carol, who have had procedures done and had a difficult time in detransition and all of that, that there's just no follow through in the States or anywhere else in terms of patient care and post-surgery care and mental health care. Like all of it is just, it's mind-blowing to me how little has, but the point of not following through is if you know perhaps the data is not going to tell you what you want it to tell you, so you can keep doing these things that, yeah, why follow through? The goal is get them to the transition point. The goal is not what happens to them after they've transitioned.
So, funny little anecdote. I don't know if you've been made aware of the mouth taping trend for when you go to sleep. There's been some viral influencers on TikTok and Instagram talking about how buying a special tape that you put over your mouth when you sleep helps with your sleep, helps with just a whole host of like sleep disorders, TMJ, everything. And my girlfriend and I have started doing it, but then I tell my mom, who is a physician, about it, and she immediately is like, "Well, the literature does not support this." And you'd be amazed that there's more scrutiny over the efficacy of mouth taping than there seems to be of cross-sex hormones on minors and puberty blockers. The fact that they were so open about the data is inconclusive. So there seems to be some a benefit to mouth taping, but it is so minimal that it is negligible, and there really needs to be long-term studies. And the adverse side effects to mouth taping have not been discovered yet, so proceed with caution.
Wow.
For taping your mouth at night. This I would like to say is not a I'm not condoning mouth taping. If you do so at your own risk. My mother does not approve.
We are not doctors and we do not play them on TV yet, but
No.
mouth tape at your own risk. But yeah, that's really mind-blowing that there's that much more information about a new trend and fad than there is about the long-term care and health of people who have done medicalization procedures around gender. That's a sad state of affairs.
And there was even an acknowledgement of how, you know, there's a lot of money to be made from mouth taping. All these mouth taping companies are $1 million industry, $1 billion industry. And so they're like, and that might be part of what motivates this, viral. And I was like, so again, you can acknowledge that money plays a role in deciding whether or not this is an effective treatment.
People talk a lot about like what is the I can never think of the blue pill that's for dudes to keep their erections. What is it
Oh,
called?
Blue Chew?
I don't know. There's like for whatever reason I keep getting
I
emails. What
You
is
do?
it? Yeah, I do. I'm like, wait a minute here. What the like, why am I getting emails about?
Why do you think I'm a dude and why do you think I have erectile dysfunction?
Right? If I was a dude, I definitely wouldn't have erectile dysfunction. But
Yeah.
yeah, whatever that pill is, like we have a whole host of information about how to keep men's penises erect, but we
Yeah.
don't have any idea what happens when you give a 13-year-old girl, you know, testosterone and what that does to her body.
when a woman who's taking testosterone gets pregnant and gives birth? How does that affect the child
Mm-hmm.
and the
And
woman
and the woman and the
breast?
breast, like all of it. All of it. Yeah. All right. Do you have anything else to?
Good on Italy for rolling things back.
Yeah, I want to take a moment to remind everyone we have a newsletter, and you can sign up for our newsletter on our website. The website is lgbausa.org, and you can get our monthly newsletter. We have a host of meetings that we run every month, and all of those meetings are in that newsletter as an update. So check that out. Please sign up for the newsletter if you're interested, and join us for some of the meetings. You can find those also at the website on our events page. Thank you everyone for listening, for watching. We appreciate you. Please like, share, subscribe, and tell your friends. And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.